So without any further ado, I would like to start off with a question to Jonathan for Network Live. And the question is involving advertising. And one of the things that we're seeing now in the marketplace as it relates to properties like AOL or the web is how the media gets placed, where does it fit. And I wanted you to just talk about that as it relates to Network Live, how you see it integrating into the properties that you guys develop.
Well, in terms of how our content gets integrated into AOL, really concentrated areas of clearly defined content sort of serve at the hub of programs that then they go out and sell to major advertisers. So we deliver like a highly defined demographic attached to content that people are really high passion points to. And then that becomes sort of sits at the center of the wheel, and then you build larger ad programs around it that sort of all point in, point out, and point back to the brands.
One of the topics that I want to build upon today is this idea of passion points. And Patty, I know that one of the things that you're interested, certainly with LiveJournal, is this concept of ads within people's private spaces. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you feel with your businesses and how people adopt to advertising within what many would feel to be private spaces.
We're trying to figure that out. Frankly, it's a very different place to advertise than it is a traditional publisher. When it's the publisher one, it's your content. You're not talking about one particular thing usually, especially if you're talking about the LiveJournal user or our new product that we're going to be launching this fall, Vox, which is a personal web blogging tool. We give people a lot of controls and privacy about how they share the information that they're publishing on the web. And figuring out where the advertiser fits within that environment is, I think, all of our challenges. We have to figure out a model that makes sense where that ad information is valuable to the user, that it's something that they invite in, the way they invite in their friends and communities that they participate in. Right now, we're doing it in a couple of different ways. LiveJournal was probably one of the only top 100 websites on the web that had no advertising on it, not one marketing message, not one PSA, before April 18th of this year. And in the middle of April, we introduced a ad-supported level of LiveJournal. You could get a lot of the services and bandwidth and additional features of the product when you opted into an ad-supported level. We call it the sponsored level. So we asked users, to make an agreement with us that in exchange for these other tools and better features that they would be exposed to advertising. And we're doing it in a very limited way. So we're getting their permission right out of the gate. We're putting the graphical ads and the branded ads more in the application spaces, places where they're composing, they're editing, they're adding friends, they're uploading pictures, confirmation pages, those sorts of things. And we're putting on the journal space, the place where their content is, more of the targeted ads based on their interests that are text ads. So we're walking very softly into that place, both for the advertisers' sake, because there's advertiser cautions and advertiser fears around being around user-generated content, and for the user space, because we really believe that it's got to be an agreement, a participation, content has to be valuable. I'm also hand-selecting all the advertisers that appear on LiveJournal at this point. I'm personally approving every single creative, every single advertiser brand. We're being really stringent about what advertisers we allow into this space. We've rejected more advertisers than we've accepted at this point, and the ones that we're accepting are the right ones. So people like Cartoon Network, Apple Computer, those ones that we know will be accepted and are willing to work with us in a pretty innovative way.
Right. Hey, one of the most interesting quotes that I've seen this year came from Judy McGrath, who's the CEO of MTV, and she said that user-generated content was really the single biggest development of the year for this year, 2006. So I thought it was a pretty bold statement coming from a place like MTV, which has really had as their hallmark the creation of original programming and production. And so we know that internet advertising topped $12 billion last year. We know that still represents a very small fraction, only 6% of what the total advertising worldwide budget is. But one of the questions that I'm really interested in as a content producer has to do with where we see this user-generated content going down the road as it interacts with brands and advertisers, teen video diaries, pet tricks. I mean, is this going to be the foundation upon which the great brands of tomorrow are launched? And I wanted to throw that out to you, Lori, and see what.
Yeah, you know, this obviously this is a topic that's coming up all the time, and we have a lot of advertisers come into our lab, which is specifically environment, to figure this stuff out. And as Patty said, we don't have all the answers, but a lot of what we try to address with the brands when they're sitting at the table is to look at this as an opportunity for feedback from your users, to actually get advocates of your brand involved in communicating what messaging they'd like and what they respond to, and then using that information to build it out. So if you take a look at like the Mentos Coke ad, and Mentos jumped on it and is now using those guys and using that as a contest and really blowing that out. And I think Coke has pushed away from it because they didn't like that, you know, there was a reaction to their product. But I think, you know, there's safe ways to do this. You know, in other words, you're still going to want moderation. You're still going to want to be true to your brand. But at the same time, it's such a tremendous opportunity to get feedback. And so it's this moving forward slowly thing. You know, no one has to like jump in, build a whole website, make a new YouTube for a major brand.
Right.
But that functionality and that concept and that strategy of getting feedback, I think, is what we're trying to work in.
And I think the other thing you have to realize is it's not just user-generated content, which I hate that word. You know, we haven't found a good one. I kind of call it, you know, peer-to-peer content sharing, social media stuff. Somebody could figure out a better word for it other than user-generated content. But I think my point is that it's about the sharing of content and information. Some of it I am creating myself. But most of what is being created in user-generated content, you know, with the exception of people, you know, making videos of themselves lip syncing, is content sharing, and I'm generating my opinions around some other, probably not user-generated content. A movie trailer, a book I've read, a song I've seen, an article about the war in Iraq. I'm sharing it, and so I think if advertisers can kind of separate a little bit, one, give up a little control and participate the way Lori's talking about, but the other is understand that what you have here is the power of people talking to other people and taking your content and spreading it, which is exactly what you want.
Yeah, I think at just one point, like a lot of times what we talk about also is you as, because a lot of a lot of the senior marketing folks at a lot of these major brands are in their 40s and 50s and 60s, so they're not blogging and they're not on YouTube, right? So part of it is just showing them those worlds, and I'm sure you guys do this all the time too, is just show these environments. But the other thing is that they're doing it in their way. They may be going to Amazon and reading recommendations, and it's already happening in this other way that they've been using for years. So I think relativity is important here. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't a new concept, getting consumer feedback. What's new is they have tools now, and it's, you know, video, and so that's the new part. But this behavior has been around. So.
Yeah, I mean, this desire to tap into the viral distribution, I think, is very critical. And I would ask Sue, you know, how does that tie in with what you're doing with, you know, with the content that's produced by AP, and how do you see that blending?
I see it as more of a continuum. I don't see a real strong division between user-generated and conventional media, as you will. And that may sound odd coming from AP because we adhere to very, you know, strict ethical standards, and they're very traditional media standards. But as Laura is reflecting, we really want our content to be distributed widely and for people to engage in it. And so we're very interested in seeing advertising attached to a piece of content and go wherever that content goes. And we are careful to protect an AP story so it doesn't get altered and somebody doesn't think AP's reporting something that we're not, that someone's inserted in there. But within that, if you can protect that piece, the more people engage around it and debate it, I mean, that I think is the wonderful use of the content. And so we still don't see advertising being that flexible now, that we see the same wariness. Actually, it's like, okay, we know you're credible, we'll attach our ad there, but where is that going to travel? And this tremendous wariness about that. And then the other thing we see on video, we have video advertising, streaming ads in partnership with Microsoft against AP's video news content. And I still see that being very conventional in that if it's a streaming ad, it tends to assume that the viewer is just watching it passively, and there are very limited opportunities in what we're seeing come out of the agencies to really engage with it, and it's rather, I think it's just in the early stages. In other words, if you're expected to watch a video, but rarely are they pairing that with a banner ad or something else that will engage you, take you to a website, get you to interact, so that the advertiser can create more of a relationship with the end user. Again, I think it's blurring that line between top-down and credible content and user interaction that we'd like to see more of.
But even where lines are blurring, I'm just concerned about sort of, even if you go back to the world of television, it's like what environment was the marketing message running in? And I think you really have to be concerned with the environment still. I mean, it's like, you look at an MTV, and for certain brands that target 12 to 24, 18 to 34, it's a very specific environment with a lot of positive halo rub-off from the properties.
Right.
And when you get into more of like a MySpace environment, there are, sort of brand adjacencies you probably wouldn't want to be associated with. It's mattered in television, it's going to matter online.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because the strategy behind where your brand and your content is doesn't change now that people are more involved in it. You still have to approach everything from the same set of smarts that you have been using for the last 5 to 10 years. The cool thing now is that we're getting more feedback. And I mean, all of you, when you go shopping, don't you do a lot of research beforehand on whatever product you're about to buy? So if an advertiser provides me an environment where I get that feedback and that information, and it happens to be engaging, and I'm spending a lot more time in it, that's a win-win, right? So it's this.
But I'm curious for Jonathan, if you see actual differences based on the environment where the ad is shown or the content it's with. Do you see measurable differences in results, or are people interested in the ad regardless and separate it from the content around it?
It depends on how you engage with it and what your metric is. I'm probably actually going to defer that to you, because that's my old hat, like my old agency world hat. It would be biased. I'm only kind of speaking to one hat now, sort of at Network Live, which is we made the call to be in very specific, very curated content with a very concentrated target audience, and in a very sort of curated environment. We've selected the acts, we've selected the performances, and it gets a very premium CPM, and the kind of marketplace has spoken. Like our content is sold out on AOL through the end of 2006. But I think you should really talk about
The
how you're metricing relevancy across different content.
I think that's interesting, and I think Patty sort of talked about it a little bit in that she's choosing who she wants around there, because what the metric is, and is it time spent, is it click through, is it CPM, is it what's the goal of the campaign too? I mean, it's very complex. I mean, are you trying to get someone to are you trying to get profile information? Are you trying to get somebody to buy tickets to a movie? Are you trying to get them to download a song? What is it that you're trying to get them to do? Is it just brand awareness? And so whether they disconnect with the banner ad or not depends on that goal of the of the campaign. And there are so many different goals now, so you really have to again go back to what's my strategy? Why am I placing my brand next to this content? Because that movie, what's a movie that I'm marketing right now?
Saw 3.
Which one?
Saw 3.
Solid 3?
Saw 3. Saw, SAW.
SAW, okay. Saw 3, sorry.
Sorry.
Saw 3. Let's see, what's the right environment?
Yeah, right.
Saw 3.
Seriously, but there are brands that will want to associate with Saw 3, even just having the banner next to the trailer and there's no other engagement. And then you may be making content partnerships, or maybe there's ringtones or whatever it is, whatever it is. But that's a huge part of it, is what am I trying to accomplish?
I think the relationships that we work with a number of studios now, but for Saw 3 as an example, it's a franchise piece, and it's a very scary movie. I mean, it really tries to push the limits. And it kind of, I think, mirrors, or it's a good analogy to how advertisers see social networking, and that they go, we want to be here, but we don't want someone, whether it's a board member or a consumer alliance group, to say, you know what, we just took a screen grab and we have this social network page from one of the blank, MySpace pages or maybe a Vox page or who knows what, and it's right next to our ad, and we have a problem with that. How can you curtail that? And we all know that MySpace, sort of as a front runner, has basically imported a lot of staff to come in there and filter and moderate that kind of content. But back to the SAW 3 model is how do we play with advertisers to say we want to be there? And as a studio executive, my take was we want you to be there, but we have to bring you in under a validation. So when you're dealing with AP, the validation is it's news, we've got to keep it ethical, we've got to keep a big separation between church and state. Entertainment's a little looser flowing than that, but I think that the challenge is to say, what is the intersection where we can keep you in as a consumer and bring you back to similar genre or similar type of content.
You've opted in, now I have you.
Right.
How can I continue the relationship with you?
And with all the aggregation of websites by the studios and portals, they're all going after, Interactive just picked up a majority stake in collegehumor.com. Everyone's going out there aggregating as much content bases as they can. AOL, Network Live and weblogs and all that kind of stuff. Exactly, TMZ with its interesting content. And I think you're really finding people saying, okay, here is some great content that we want to be associated with, but is it more important to them just to be close to that advertiser, page view, to say, I can go out there and get this continual audience flow?
Well, I think one thing that we have to also consider is, as we're talking about this, I'm listening to it thinking, what we're looking for is the right match, right? The right match between the content and the advertiser. And I would propose that we reject that completely because we reject it completely. The anarchist blogger. Because the reality is it's not the content that the advertiser wants to target. It's me.
Right.
It's the user. And if the user is creating an environment that is reflective of their broad interests, their multiple interests, their private, their professional, their personal lives, what we have to figure out is how to target the user and be less hung up about the fact that I'm writing that I broke up with my boyfriend and you may not want, this rant that has the F word in it next to your brand, and there may be a screen grab taken that could be shown somewhere, and more about trying to figure out how does the advertiser meaningfully integrate into my life. Because that content, whether it's I've broken up with a boyfriend, or this is the movie I saw last weekend, or this is my political opinion on this next election, is exactly where the advertiser wants to be. You want to be up close and personal to me. You want to be there in my life and relevant in my life. So I think as users start to, and we're creating a tool, Box is one of those tools that allow people to integrate everything, their Flickr photos, their clips from iFilm, their Amazon wish lists, all of that, and also control who gets to see what pieces of that. We have to figure out how to put the advertiser there and have the advertiser a little less concerned about that potential screen grab. You're gonna catch me on a bad day because, guess what? I'm gonna buy Tylenol on a bad day, or you're gonna want me to buy Coke on a good day or a bad day. So I think that the more we try to find the right niche and put the advertiser into the right environment, we're moving farther away from what the ultimate goal might be, which is how do you get close to the person? How do you become relevant to my life?
Well, I would counter that with the notion that, and this is more of a question to the panel, is don't you think there's a large group of people out there that really still want to just be marketed to, and that they don't want people necessarily identifying or engaging with their brand? I want to keep this thread of the discussion going because I really think it's the purpose of the panel today, which is, how does internet advertising get smarter? How does it get more effective, more targeted, more measurable? And from what I'm hearing from some of the panelists is that it does that by engaging with the content more efficiently and more directly. And then I think Patty's got a good point of view too, in that it should be more relevant to the actual end user as well. So I'd like to throw that out. If anybody has had any case studies or real life examples they can point to, I'd like them to jump in one way or the other.
I just know as as an agency dealing with a lot of advertisers, that speaking to preferences and lifestyle, that search is obviously a huge part of all of this. So that what Google's doing and just working search and search functionality and the ability to really serve up some of what they're asking for. To your point, you know, what are my interests? And then I do want advertising that surrounds my interests. So I think we're talking a lot about how will search play out, you know, moving forward, and how can we leverage it, and how do we work it into things, you know.
I have a jump off on that too. I've been talking to Google for many years, and Yahoo Search, which again with this Project Panama is delayed into 2007, and they've actually turned the tide of their editorial or their filtering around to catch up, or to at least try to catch up to Google. And it used to be when you submitted your keywords, you had a 2-day sort of waiting period, like buying a gun or something. And now they're saying 2 days after you submit, we'll have editorial go in, but we'll go live immediately or as soon as we can. That kind of changeover, I think, in terms of relevancy is very important. Another thing that comes together, I think, here is understanding what the life expectancy of users are on the social networks or network lives or the user-generated mashup channels, what have you. Because going back to, you know, what Six Apart is doing or trying to see is that relationship, build it and then own it a little bit. Be with that person. So if you have a bad day where you grab that screenshot and someone sends it to Disney saying you're advertising pirates against something bad on YouTube, whatever, it really comes to mind to say, you know what, things happen in people's lives that diffract every once in a while. And if you believe it, it's a long-term relationship. And I think the studios and the labels and a number of companies, they go in there and they say, well, our user count for our studio direct communications is a couple million people. It doesn't really grow that much though, and they kind of just forget about it and burn the list between films. And it's like, who's out there on the advertising level who says, we get it, we want to be with these users from day one, collect them from any of the social media networks, and not own them, but, you know, grow with them.
And on the audience side, or the tool side, for where Six Apart comes from, I mean, one of the things I'm challenged with doing is really trying to figure out what information to use to put the relevant ads in, because there's guesswork, right? You can guess that if somebody has tagged a post Hawaii, that they may be interested in Hawaii, or travel, maybe more broadly. Or you can engage the user and ask them specifically what ads you want to see. So one of the things when we launched LiveJournal that we did is we asked users, when they opted into the sponsored level, their ad category preferences. So instead of implicitly trying to guess what may be important to me, we said, hey, we want to deliver you ads that are more of interest to you. So we have 25 categories, check them and tell us what ads you're interested in, and we'll try to serve those more. And we want to be able to refine that. We've also let them know that the interest, the free-form interest words that they put in their profile, when they establish their profile, will be used to target ads. And we target Google ads off those interests, and have, you know, maybe not surprisingly found, but the highest CPMs we get are when we tell the user what we're going to do with the information, and they can control their ads. So we told them that we're going to pass Google your interests. We're not going to pass them your private data, anything that you mark as friends only. Google isn't your friend, so we're not going to share any of the friend stuff with them in terms of the network. But anything you do publicly, what you put in your interest profiles, the tags on public posts will be used to target ads. And guess what? They actually go in and change their interests so that they see the relevant ads. So I think there's also that engagement level when you tell people, because they want ad information. They want to know what the newest movies are coming out this weekend. They want to know the next hybrid car that's being launched. They want this information.
They want to monetize too, on top of that.
Exactly, and they want a free product. That's the other part, and those who are engaged in it understand that advertising pays to have this really cool tool that they can use to communicate with people that are important in their lives. So I think that's another piece of it, is really asking the user, what ads do you want to see, getting the feedback, and then being really transparent about how you're targeting. Because we also get feedback. We have an ads community where they'll say, I absolutely hate that ad, how come that was here? And we tell them, well, here, tweak your targeting this way, and you won't see those ads anymore.
But I think it's not about absolute rights and wrongs, because again, I think you were saying it's like what your goal is. I mean, in terms of people who advertise on our content, if you go to AOL right now, it's Nissan and it's Verizon, which makes complete sense for sort of like targeting 18 to 34 with that halo of music. But when we go out and market our concerts sometimes, we did Corinne Bailey Ray, and we got some of the best feedback from like a user gen thread on like what to play at my wine and cheese party,
Right.
because it was sort of that kind of music was relevant to what they were doing. So it works at all ends of the spectrum. It's just what
Yeah.
you're trying to get out of it.
And that's a great point too, is identifying in this world hand raisers like that. And then you can now go back to that hand raiser and perhaps, highlight him,
Right.
give him kudos, and show that you get rewarded for giving good information. And then that person becomes someone that you go back to again. And we're starting to see that with YouTube, with like, a woman getting hired by Carson Daly, right? She did a great video, and so there's this feedback loop that you can even then market, reversely by taking people that are participating.
Here's one last thing on that side too. I mean, what you were saying about being close to the consumer, partnering advertiser relationships in. A big idea might be that as users start to monetize, whether it be Google AdSense or Rever or something like that, as they step into that space of saying it's not only my content and my view and my targeted audience who I'm speaking to, but I'm starting to monetize it, it brings them, I think, a little bit closer to the advertisers, which brings more confidence or protection to the relationship too.
Yeah, I like to think of things in sports analogies, and I guess the analogy I would think about is, do people want to use the golf club that Tiger Woods uses, or do they want to use the golf club that'll make them a better golfer? And to me, I think the majority of people will want to use the club that Tiger Woods uses. And I think that to the casual observer, over the years, we've seen that almost all advertising at the end of the day comes down to utilizing beauty or celebrity or fame or humor or music, some form of sex appeal to make its case. And I guess another question back would be, do we see then internet advertising with these hand raisers, these other different models evolving? Is that something that over time will diminish the sex appeal of that we currently see in today's advertising on the net? Is that?
I don't think so, because I think two things. First of all, what people say they want. There is a limit to how much people can self-define what they want, because I can tell you from the news business, what people say they read and what they read is notably different. And I think you will find the same thing with advertising in that. So I think there is still going to be, advertisers will always target human nature and things that appeal, whether people self-identify with that or not, in general.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think the other part of it is you're right. I mean, people are going to want the golf club that Tiger Woods uses. But they also want to know what movie their coworker saw, and they want to read the book that the smart people in their life are reading. And so I think that you have both, right? You have the celebrity element. LiveJournal is full of celebrity and celebrity gossip, and whose hairstyle is the hottest, and they're celebrities. But there are also groups of girls in Ohio who are putting up pictures and saying, "Does my hair cute?" And so I think, and here's where I bought these shoes. And so I think, you're just harnessing influencers and word of mouth in both ways. And it's just the tools now that allow you to share that same type of information you shared over the back fence or you read in People magazine.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you talk to a lot of the YouTubes of the world and you really dig down and find out what some of the most watched material is, I mean, inevitably it comes back to these these pet tricks and content like that, and yet you don't see any networks out there rushing to launch the pet trick 24-hour channel, right? And if anything, what they've decided to do is pretty much leave their content alone as it exists in prime time and work within the traditional models of sitcoms and things, and then go out, as Fox has done, and really just buy these other separate businesses and sort of figure it out later.
Neil, I think that goes to your point that there still is a huge part of the population that wants curated content, if you will. Somebody else do the selection, do the work, figure out what I'm going to be most interested in, surprise me now and then, and so forth. And that, again, goes back to, I don't think targeting is going to do away with brand advertising, which is much more there, and I think that'll continue to grow along with targeted.
And people are looking at YouTube in aggregate, the 100 million videos a day. If everybody here goes to the YouTube homepage and looks at the top viewed videos, only 5 videos get more than 1 million plays a month. So really, there are not that many people in individual viewership who want that pet trick. It's the aggregate of the millions of things out there. So if you look at how many people go to watch One American Idol versus watch any one video on YouTube, it's not
Yeah, it's something we don't talk about, and you just mentioned it, which made me think about it, is boomers. And that we're always talking about 18 to 24-year-olds on YouTube, but there's this whole world of people that have a lot of cash and and are service oriented. And so back to you identifying with lifestyle, I think a lot of the content we're talking about, if it provides a service to that person's life, if they get news
Makes
in
their
the way
life
they
easier.
right.
Yeah.
And you know, if you only have like one night a month to go to a movie because you've got kids and you've got a crazy job, you want to be told about that movie. You know, frequently, like my parents are way past boomers, but they're always saying to me, "What can we go see? We want to go see a movie." You know, it's the one Friday at 8 o'clock, and they want to go see a movie. And so I think we're ignoring also frequently this generation that does want stuff and does want to be told what that stuff is and doesn't have time to spend hours on YouTube. You know. And,
Isn't everyone on MySpace, 80% of them at least 99 years old? I mean,
yeah, exactly. No, and there's this new social networking site. I don't know if you guys have been to it. It's called Eons, E-O-N-S.
The one with the death notices?
Yeah, yeah. But I went to it, and the thing is, if you sign up, the profile is like 5 pages long.
Yeah.
But I find that interesting because obviously they are gathering data, which they are going to then serve back to advertisers later for targeting purposes. And that to me is what's interesting, is that if you do target to them, because they are, you know, they're a different kind of retirement than our parents, right? It's a whole different game now. That's interesting. That's what you're talking about, and that's what you're talking about, you know?
And making it easy, and also giving the person, because those people also have a lot of issues about giving up that information, and the privacy controls and fears around the internet. So there's a way to do it that is not creepy,
Right.
and that again is fairly transparent to say, here's what we'll give you what's important to you based on what you tell us is important to you. At the same time, people can't create such a closed world that they bring in the RSS feed of their favorite newspaper and they pull it all into one space, because their natural curiosity will make you want to put your head up
Right.
above your own little box that you're in and see what else is happening out there, and you need to be able to expose people to advertising messages and other content through those other channels, I think.
Yeah, it feels like to me that we're emerging out of a period over the last few years where we've really focused on the measurement of advertising. And to me, I think from a content producer perspective, you're going to start really now seeing the focus being flipped, and people are going to start now measuring what the actual content is doing. And that, to me, is, I think, an interesting shift. And it'll really sort of define whether or not these big events and these big stars really are what drives the market. And I for one still happen to believe that people want to see Dave Matthews as opposed to Dave Morris. But it's going to be interesting to see, especially in an area like the motion picture business, where already you've seen in the DVD marketplace that certain films, because of the longer period that they have to make their case to people as to why they should be seen, have actually broken out. And I'm sure you saw that, Adrian, in the DVD business as well.
Yeah, well, I'm just starting to get a sense too, because the DVD, obviously there's an imbalance in the market now for DVDs, yet the business models for digital haven't been logged in quite yet. So people are starting to go, okay, well, how do I go out there and pursue this better? And actually, from my experience with a number of studios, they are looking to put more money into digital. And it's not that 3 to 5%, which has been for the past how many years.
Everyone's jumping on.
But yeah, because they want the measurement and they want the relationship with the consumer. They want to go, everyone says D2C now. It's not B2C or C2C, it's D2C, direct to consumer. And they want that relationship. And what's funny about it, speaking back into the actors themselves, who pretty much have just said, well, we're just part of the title, and I hope to God it sells well at Walmart or opening weekend. And I think it ties back to the idea that when are they going to either branch out of their live journals or their network live accounts and to say, I need to start advertising for myself to roll this up. So one success story, rags to riches, was Tyler Perry, who did the Diary of a Mad Black Woman and Medea's Family Reunion movie. He had like a email list of 1 million people that were super responsive, and it was a pure text-only email that goes out once or twice a week. And he actually shot up numbers. When that thing went out there, we saw tracking spike. and we didn't do anything else. We actually separated all their media buys around that and just put that out there. We didn't tell them, we just wanted to see what happened. And it would spike like crazy, and I think it's going after the next generation of, again, with the DVD market you mentioned, going after the next generation of talent. Maybe it's Dick Morris or Dave Morris or Dave Matthews, who say, you know what, I need to branch away from the studios, the labels, the technology, so to speak, and start to do my own aggregating.
Well, it's authentic communication. I think that's why it works. The first season of America's Top Model, the girl who didn't win the short hair, I can't remember her name, had a live journal, and just it wasn't about marketing. She just chronicled what was happening on the show and her feelings, and she continues to this day to blog on a regular basis, has a whole group of friends and following, and has basically created a market for herself if she does a movie or whatever she does. But it's not coming from that place. It's coming from an authentic wanting to talk to people and participate, and I think that there's a lot that can be leveraged that way. If it's not managed as much, you can harness it the way.
I'm hoping that the agencies eventually step in with the big talents, and it's not another pop.com or something like that, but it's something where they go in and say, we know you're never going to blog. We just know. You may have an entourage and all that, but eventually we want you to realize that you can build something of matter here. You can build some critical mass around who you are, so you're protected when these traditional windows, and they're going to last for a while. Physical's around for a while. Exhibition's around for a couple more years, I think. Is that when they start to see the shift themselves, and their agents are starting to tell them, and their managers too, is that you have to go out there. So I'm a little worried when they start to blog, because their publicists are going to go,
Get on it.
insane. But,
Right, and the authenticity part bubbles up again.
Right.
It's key. I mean, we were talking about something else that Breakfast a little, which plays into this. We're seeing the middle falling out. I mean, it seems sort of like that's the toughest space to be in. It's like if we do a concert with Madonna, it goes really well, and if we do a concert with like Hawthorne Heights, it's sort of bubbling up off Victory Records, it goes really well. And we were talking about sort of bottom-up movie marketing, and sort of top-down is like Snakes on a Plane, which is top-down but looked like bottom-up.
Yeah.
It's the middle market in the music business that's having a hard time. It's the middle market in the record business.
And middle management
Yeah.
in the U.S. as well.
So it seems easy to bubble up to a certain point, and what was the old studio model? You want 80% like U.S. awareness in like 6 weeks. You can still make that work. Look at Bruckheimer.
Right.
You can make both ends work. It's the middle that's harder and harder to work in today's model.
Yeah.
I have two more questions, and we want to answer some questions from the audience as well. One of the trends that obviously is shaping things is the penetration of broadband into the marketplace now. Those numbers were up 33% in 2005, 43 million homes. Now 99% of the U.S. is able to receive broadband, and as we keep seeing these increases in broadband usership, one of the things that's coming down the pipe is the advent of HD programming as well, and the numbers there show by 2007 you're looking at over 40 million homes will be HD enabled, and I wonder if that almost sets back the progress. Do people then will they go back to more passive viewing? Will that in some way impede the growth of the internet? I wonder if anybody has any thoughts as to whether that'll put the emphasis back really more on just regular entertainment as opposed to some of these other developments we've seen.
I know that all of our clients are trying to figure out what to do about HD, because they create HD content and then the viewing experience isn't necessarily HD.
Right.
So there's a lot of disconnect between the delivery and the reception of HD. But also the other point that you brought up is that I think still that television big screen HD experience is still really important to the big, the brand awareness piece. So that all the other stuff we're talking about is part of that story. So that HD is just another channel. I don't think it'll disrupt what we're doing. And in fact, when the pipes get laid down, you'll be getting sent HD eventually. You know what I mean? So.
And it seems to change engagement time. I mean, we don't just deliver content on AOL. We also deliver it to DirecTV and on XM, and we see different engagement points. Like people that watch our content on DirecTV watch a whole concert. On AOL it's like 8 minutes. On a wireless device it's like 2.5 minutes. So it just changes the level and depth of engagement.
Where and when.
Well, that depth of engagement brings me to my last question, which is that by 2015, all indications show that more people will be accessing the web by handheld phone than any other device. And so I would just put the question out to the panel is really how does that change your businesses moving forward? And does the phone necessarily then even truncate further what is a viewer experience that continually seems to be decreasing in terms of time viewers spend with content? I mean, most of the stats would indicate that 8 minutes is about tops now for any kind of broadband viewing experience. And if you're seeing 2 minutes then on the phone, where are we headed? I mean, are we headed to a 30-second movie, or we see these people doing short films? I mean, is that where people ought to be focusing energy?
I think most of us on the panel are so jaded with technology that we probably would hope that it never moves too far off voice or email. But in terms of short attention span theater, I think we're going to get to a point where you start to set your personal workflow off your phone and your personal entertainment flow, or maybe even the tie into your buying patterns and advertising. So you start to look at that as, okay, here's something I remember I have to look at because I'm in a store and I'm going to UPC it or whatever it is, and then I'll go home and do some due diligence, or it'll come from you're talking like 9 years out. I mean, we don't know what we're going to have, but I imagine it's going to be some kind of shared experience. I use the terminology. We'll have like a personal time clock where we can go in and see what we've watched over the week, what we've checked out via our phone, which is our navigation device on some level at least, and eventually play it all into it's a remote control that has more features and we can personalize.
People are using it right now for blogging like crazy. I mean, we're not surprised, but we are surprised by the percentage of people who are, taking a photo here, hitting send, and publishing it right to their blog. And that's everything from, pictures on a vacation, the kind of things, news that people say, here's a car accident, and I just saw it in my blog, to here's a pair of shoes I want to buy, or here's the sink at Home Depot I want, and taking a picture and blogging it back up to their phone. And it's as easy as the subject line being your title of that message, and the body of it being a full blog post. And a lot of the bloggers that aren't personally doing personal blogging, but they're more the pro bloggers, prosumer bloggers, are writing entire posts on their phone, uploading it to Typepad right now, and posting from this conference. So
right there.
Yeah, somebody's back there doing it right now. But so I think that we talk about HGTV and the experience. Our lives are fast and fragmented, and the tools are going to come along to help us do the things that we already are wanting to do, and it's easy. I mean, right now I can send a photo to my Vox, my LiveJournal, my Flickr account. I can send it to 6 places in one time, one email address, and have it published everywhere. So.
Perfect example is, look at how much Harvey Levin monetized that one little video camera piece from a phone of Mel Gibson drinking at moon shadows. It's on the news, it's on TMZ.com.
Right.
Yeah, I think also for us with our brands, we're talking about mobile, not only to be able to have your web portal look good on a mobile phone, because to me right now, if you haven't taken care of your website to make sure it looks good, but also it's a great opt-in channel for a brand. Wherever you are, through short codes or what's coming down the pipe with QR codes, and all the stuff that's happening in Asia. I mean, it is a tremendous opt-in point of sale opportunity.
I think one of the interesting things, to bring it back to sports again, that I've seen is is in the New York market, where you have the Yes Network, which owns the Yankees. They're now responsible for all the broadcasting of the Yankees games, and some of the sports writers in town have actually accused some of the commentators of being a little bit too pro Yankees in their analysis of the games that they see. And one of the things that's happening now in HD is that DirecTV subscribers now have the ability to watch, while they're watching a Yankees game, they can actually go online through the television. They can see stats real time. They can set a separate camera angle. They can actually go in and get information on the fly. And something like 35% of all the people that are able to utilize that have done it, which to me is really interesting, and giving people almost a feeling of independence in what they're watching. Hey, maybe this guy isn't, his stats don't back up how good the guy is actually saying he is. So. That's been an interesting development too, and to me it just seems like an interesting example moving forward of how HD technology could morph with some form of interactive audience component as well. So We'd like to open it up to questions if anybody has any questions in the audience. Yep.
Hi, I have a question about user-generated content and advertising around it. So, for example, Six Apart decided to kind of pay their users with more features and functionality if they opt in. Do you think these user-generated sites are obligated to share some profit or some additional features with their users if they opt in for advertising?
I think we have two models at Six Apart right now. Movable Type and TypePad, which are for the pro blogger, the publisher, even if it's a publisher of one. And I think the motivation of somebody who wants to be a publisher and write that kind of a blog, it may very well be monetization, right? They want to quit their day job, they want to make money off their Google AdSense, or they may be, huge companies like Knight Ridder, who was a partner with Six Apart. And in those cases, they're monetizing their own blogs. We are basically a tool provider for them and continue to improve the tools and allow them to have that. On something like LiveJournal and Vox, which are going to be ad-supported models, we really view those as the motivation for creating that content. The motivation for using that tool doesn't really have anything to do with, making $1.25 a month on an AdSense account. You're not about trying to cultivate an audience. You're not about trying to be a publisher. You are using it in more of a journal way, a scrapbooking, a personal life story way. And in those cases, what we intend to do is make the advertising relevant, valuable to them, good content as much as we possibly can, and then they're not paying us money for those services. It's not a license or subscription model. We're being paid with the advertising, and they will continue to get better tools and services as we continue to improve the monetization of the site. It's just the philosophy that most people who want to make money off the AdSense account or want to monetize the content they're generating are going to move to a more pro tool, whereas these other tools are more about just wanting to have a presence on the web that you can control. So,
Why don't you get advertisers to sponsor free pro tools?
free pro tools.
To give them you do the subscription on TypePad and stuff like that. What if an advertiser were to say, hey, we'll give a free month to everyone, or you may already give a free month out, I think, but give away some free usage of the tool sets.
Well, there's a ton of interest on advertisers' part wanting to tap into the TypePad, and especially the TypePad audience base, because while there's 50,000 TypePad account holders, they have an audience of about 10 million, and they're small businesses. They're a hard group to reach. We just haven't focused on that primarily. There's some other companies out there, John Mattel's Federated Media, and things that are trying to monetize those bloggers. We just haven't really focused on that, but there's clearly a lot of interest. I know now. I just started there in January and just introduced advertising into the whole Six Apart world. I get tons of inquiries from advertisers about wanting to talk to those pro bloggers. We just haven't developed those.
I know in the comedy business, Dane Cook often cites MySpace as really taking him to the top of the comedy business. And the joke was that he ought to be paying his royalties to his friends out on MySpace as they come in. Any other questions? Yep.
I have a question with respect to the TV advertising. On the cable TV or IPTV, it's quite possible today to do addressable advertising, so you can address different local areas or even different profiles of consumers, so with different ads, which enables the companies to run the campaigns on the national level to adapt to the local or to the profiles. Do you see many advertisers who actually adapt to those technologies and take advantage of this, or do you see any difficulties in adaptation?
I can address that, being the person representing advertising. We've talked with a lot of our brands about addressable advertising, and like Comcast has ad tag and ad copy where you can really change it on the fly. And there is interest there, and there have been a lot of tests, but the whole approach to cable VOD and advertising has been a little bit of a slow climb, just because there's sort of like a 4 to 6 week break between when you want to do a buy and when you want to do something like that. So it's not the most holistic media opportunity right now. And I think for doing addressable advertising, broadband and mobile are so much more, so much easier right now to play with. You can watch what a broadband ad is doing, and that afternoon change the color of the background. So it's not to say that national advertising and addressable advertising isn't significant. I think it will be, and I think certainly as the IPTV networks roll out and those walled gardens really become established in homes, that'll happen more. But I think it's been a little bit on the technically awkward side in our U.S. infrastructure right now.
In the tests that have been done, have there been feedback from the users about that at all?
You know what?
Their reaction?
I don't know that there's a company called Visible World, and Visible World is doing that in the U.S. and they would be good to talk to about it. I don't have a direct case study I can quote right now, but the kind of thing they're doing is like changing the offer in a Hispanic sub DMA versus something else. And I can't think it wouldn't be interesting, but it's just been challenging technically. People don't want to, most of the brands I'm talking to, they don't want to have to wait 6 weeks for the actual thing to happen. It's just, it's a hard sell right now.
We are seeing a big growth in geo-targeting online, in all online ads. They get a premium, but it's not so much tailoring the ad as just we're doing a big push in this market, if it's like telecom advertisers or so forth, saying we're targeting this. We just want that area.
Yep, question?
Could you talk a little bit about pricing models in terms of CPM versus performance-based metrics like cost per click?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. That conversation almost happens every day. In our environment, one of the things that we are challenged with doing is trying to get the advertisers to let go a little bit of the CPM model, actually, and to adopt more about time spent. And this is a word that everyone's going to say, engagement. The engagement metric, what that really is, and how do you measure, time spent with content, and is it length of time literally? Is it the amount of clicks? Is it something that you've gotten somebody to do? So we're almost benchmarking different pilots in the new media and emerging media space, and per pilot, you're almost creating new metrics. So it's conversations we're having to almost create new metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I would add to that, just on a CPM basis,
Yeah.
is you see a huge spread on CPM for user-generated content
Yeah.
versus curated content. Like it's multiples different, not even percentages.
Yeah, it sort of is stopped. It doesn't mean you don't know what it means anymore.
Right.
So it's almost better to take the media you're dealing with and really look at what you're trying to accomplish, and then back out what the metrics should be for it. And that's a challenge because you have so many advertisers who are used to a certain list of metrics and a certain list of data they expect to get and that they expect to be paying for. And part of the wonderful thing about the medias that we represent here is that you can get all this great data and you can get all this other information that you couldn't get before. And so I think we're always talking about the new stuff, the new information you can get. I don't know if you guys have that issue as well, but.
Well, and then it's a dicey thing, right? Because then there's privacy issues too. So as you get
Right.
more into that personal space, and there's all this data, how much of it do you share? I kind of jokingly said, we told our live journal users Google isn't your friend when you're marking things friend only. So what data can you use? What data can you pass? And frankly, on the CPM question, the growth, the rapid growth of MySpace and the tonnage that is there right now and how they're utilizing the banner advertising, especially through that, has completely changed the pricing model in the past 6 months, because when you can buy something for a 7-cent CPM and you're getting tonnage, it makes it harder for those of us who are selling premium, targeted, different kind of environment for your advertising to be able to command the CPMs that we've been doing last year.
I think you're looking at that backwards. They don't want a 7-cent CPM.
No, they definitely
All
don't.
they can get is a 7-cent CPM, and people are, I think,
Well, and they're willing to
ignoring
take it because
well,
of
they're
the
willing to
tonnage,
take it
because
because
of
they can't sell
volume.
it, because they can't sell it.
Yeah.
And that's the dirty MySpace secret that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, but I think what
what was the New York Times quote? 95% of Yahoo's revenue, 95% of Yahoo's traffic, 5% of Yahoo's revenue. Ultimately, same
Well,
business
and
model.
you look at it, and from your perspective as a buyer of that, you know, would you pay more for it? I mean, the environment that it's in, how it's placed, the fact that there's, you know, download the smiley face, blinking ads, you know, that everything is there. You know, there's a little bit of, yeah, that's all they can get, but I think there's ways to get more.
Well, the social media side too, whether it's MySpace, which is the prime example here, or YouTube, there's a advertiser hack. They can go in there and create their own free pages, and when someone says, hey, let's go do your ad sales pitch to one of the studios, we say, well, we're already doing it because we can go do it for free. And if they cut that down, then we say, oh, well, we never really had this issue because Yahoo, you really couldn't hack, so to speak, in there, and that's why they have that branded advantage, I think. But I think there will be a day, maybe soon, maybe later, where advertisers say, okay, it's got to be just like when we were getting our free editorial on Yahoo or AOL or any of these companies out here. We treat it that same way. It's almost a sponsored editorial or news or whatever mixed with the advertising that has maybe a better CPM.
Yeah, the current TV model I think is really interesting too, where you sponsor it, an advertiser sponsors it, and then consumers, you know, get to make commercials, and then the winner gets a certain amount of money, and then that's what the advertiser's paying for, is that brand awareness. So that's not necessarily clicks either. You know what I mean? That's more like this environment, hanging out in it, looking at all the people voting. It's a different model.
And we're doing that with LiveJournal, and we will with Vox too, in terms of, you know, you can create a Vox account and make your Vox account, or just like you make your MySpace account for the Honda Element. But we're doing it where you're getting different things than you can get just coming in as a regular user, and also helping seed that, because, you know, I can create a LiveJournal, I can create a MySpace account, but unless I have some access to that whole group of people, I'm just one in a sea of others. I'm not capitalizing on the viral nature of it. And so I think that's another way that we can kind of get beyond the CPMs and be able to help them integrate. And then the onus becomes on the advertiser to create good content, because if you're not creating good content, I can just uncheck you as a friend, and no longer are you part of my, you know, world. You know, you are dead to me, advertiser. Just like anybody else who starts to put drivel on their content. You know, if I'm reading you through my friend's page or my readers on there, you know, I uncheck you, and I no longer know what you have to say. So I think there's opportunities there to help advertisers and monetize that in a very different way than just putting up a profile and running some banners that point to it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the video streaming ads have seen a big discrepancy in their price versus what's going out just regular run a schedule and banners. And so from a perspective of a company that's, you know, holding 200,000 hours of video programming, we definitely like to see more of that moving forward.
It's the same as cable TV CPMs, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, an MTV.com CPM for pre-roll and MTV CPM are about the same.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
I'll ask a follow-up.
Yeah.
You mentioned metric of time spent, and I'm with Phoenix, and one of the things that we offer is a slideshow creator tool, a mashup creator tool. One of the things that we've talked about is people may spend 10 minutes creating a slideshow,
Right.
but that's only one quote-unquote page view, right? We've discussed the possibility of a rotating banner ad in the same way that you see them on billboards, 20-second rotating banner ad. What would be your comments on that concept?
You mean having advertising within that consumer area?
Yeah, like there would be a banner ad across the top, but instead of having this one quote-unquote page view where somebody's there for 5 or 10 minutes every 30 seconds, it could rotate out and create an ad impression rather than a page view.
I think that sounds interesting. I think part of that is, again, what will your consumer tolerate? You know what I mean? What will they tolerate, and what will who are the brands that you're putting there? I mean, it's a vague answer, but.
And what's your level of engagement too, while you're actually creating this 10-minute mashup video? I mean, we, as I said at the beginning, we are putting a lot of the branded graphical ads in the application spaces. So it's the same place. You're composing your, your post. You're going in and cropping photos for user picks and those sorts of things. And is that a branded experience? And you should charge for time more than you charge for performance because they're less likely to go off and participate in that advertiser experience. But it's also great value to that advertiser because you're right there in a creation space. Apple Computer is a good one that really wanted to be there because obviously somebody's there creating something and have this message that Apple is the tool that helps you be more creative. Wonderful space for them, but unless you're rotating that ad out, you're getting one impression over a 10-minute period of time. It's a good deal for the advertiser and doesn't help you monetize.
Well, Patty just brought up Apple, so maybe we'll close that on this last question because we are close to their hometown, and you see what's happening now with iTunes, and the typical deal there is really just a flat revenue share. I mean, do we think that Apple will open up to advertising for some of this content moving forward to help their partners realize more revenue, and where do we see that going? Will iTunes Video become as dominant as iTunes is in the music space? I mean, that's something I think we should all consider, and I would make that our last question.
I mean, I think, I know I've had a lot of brands come to me and say, how do I get on iTunes?
Right.
And certainly it's almost up to the networks what they want to attach to that download right now. They're kind of controlling it from that aspect. I don't think as a consumer I would mind seeing, a quick bumper in front of a piece of video content because I'm used to that. But at the same time, I don't want to have to pay for something and then also see advertising. So
yeah, that's the double bind in
Right.
that.
That's the
Because
double
if I'm going
Right.
to pay $2 for it, it's sort of like if I'm paying for HBO, I don't want commercials.
right, or there's a sponsorship model. I mean, we didn't talk about it, but do you guys ever use Pandora? I love Pandora because they give the consumer a choice of watching ads or paying, and I think that's okay.
Right.
So I think it's going to be hard to stick.
I mean, I can say just speaking from the sports perspective, the NFL receives $6 billion a year for its television license, and right now you've got 4 of the top 5 video programming downloads on iTunes are sports related, and yet there's a big difference between $6 billion and $3, download. So I mean that I think is going to be a defining issue moving forward is how that.
Yeah. But you should be allowed, say, to put other trailers in front of a piece of content.
Well, we do that on the physical side
Yeah.
already, and some studios are actually primed to not even allow you to skip those ads, which I
Yeah.
think is a little bit of the wrong way to go. But I think with Apple, I had heard that they were looking at doing advertising on their movie trailers page because they obviously own the QuickTime player, and they pay if it's a big enough film release like a Star Wars for that advantage. I just think that it's for them, it's the player, it's the QuickTime player, and it's those darn iPods, and everything else is,
To hell with it.
Yeah. Well, with the 60 million iPods out there, it's hard to ignore.
Well, you
it's something
think
for us.
about how many, our new toolbox has a thing called the question of the day. People answer questions and participate in it. And one of the questions we asked is, what's your favorite television commercial? And it was amazing how engaged people were with that. They were downloading that content left and right, putting commercials up. And the other part is you've got to start to think about the ads as content.
Right.
And if you can create good ads as content and make them valuable, and then you make them free, right? There's a model in there somewhere that there's some things I'm going to pay $2 for downloads, and there's some things that are just cute and fun, and I want to see again, and I will download it, and that's your commercial message.
I think in general what we've seen is consumers are very open to ad support. I mean, a lot of people are playing around with versions that you can get that are ad-free. CNN's got a service where you can get all their news ad-free and so forth, but generally you're not seeing a big pushback against advertising, so I think you'll see more of it.
They want us around.
Well, and our adoption in LiveJournal, when we launched the ad-supported version of it, because we have a paid version, and there's of the 10 million account holders, there's 150,000 paid users. There are now over 750,000 users that are in the sponsored level. And about 2 million actives a month is what we have on LiveJournal. So, you know, we're getting close to half of the users active every month that have said, yeah, I think this is a fair exchange, and I'm fine with seeing ads, especially if you do it differently, especially if you do it in a way that isn't, that doesn't junk up my experience here. And they're very open to it. They get it. You know,
Well,
it's been around.
One sort of maybe tail
Yeah.
question here. Who do you think is marrying the content to the brand the best way? If everyone just had an answer, like best example in NFL would be, I don't know, ESPN Sports Center, where they do the cubicle, you know, tackles, or behind the scenes of who the anchors are. I mean, who's doing the best advertising across the brands we like?
Well, I mean, I would say Starbucks and music is a really interesting place to start right now. I think we're out of time. We're getting hooked. But on those upbeat notes, I'd like to end this and thank Patty, Lori, and Jonathan, Adrian, Sue for their participation today and for your attendance. Thank you.